Look on tomatoes.
I know.
So they're the tomatoes. Mommy, there's some big red tomatoes.
Big red ones?
No, there's red tomatoes. Oh, cute little one. There's a little one. There's big one. So tomatoes. They're cute tomatoes. They're cute tomatoes.
Cute.
Yeah, they're cute tomatoes. I see something.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you my favorite way to process tomatoes. Years prior, I would do the way of blanching the tomatoes for a couple minutes, putting them in an ice bath water, then removing the skins and processing them however I would prefer to use them at that time, whether it be pizza sauce, pasta sauce, salsa, etc. But times have changed through some experimenting. I started doing this 2 years ago and have come to love this process. Does not require standing over boiling water, and this is really beneficial for those that have just a few tomato plants and you don't get enough tomatoes at one time to really process or work with, but you don't want them to go bad. I'm going to show you my new technique, my new way of working with tomatoes and why I like doing it this way. So a couple of days ago, Preston and I went out in the garden and we picked tomatoes, brought them inside. He likes to help, which I think is great. I encourage that as much as possible. So his job was to help wash the tomatoes. I cored the tomatoes and tried to cut off any spots or blemishes on the skin that I wouldn't want later on down the road. Here's tip number 1 of many. Get you a strawberry huller, as they call it, or a strawberry core. They work perfect for tomatoes. Some of your larger ones may need a little bit more trimming with a knife around where the stem attaches, but super easy, super quick. This is my first year using one, and it is a time saver for sure. To use the huller, you push down on the top button. That will expand the little claws at the very end. You push it down into the top of the tomato where you want it cored. You release the top button and it closes in, grabs it. You give it a little twist one way or the other and it removes the stem, the core area with ease. When working with tomatoes, save your skins. You can dry out, dehydrate your skins, put them in a coffee grinder or a blender. We use the Vitamix. Blend it up into a powder. You can save that in a mason jar container and use later on if you're in the need of tomato paste or tomato sauce, or you can turn around and put that powder back into whatever you're making, whether it be pasta sauce, pizza sauce, just plain old sauce. You can add it back in there and it enhances the tomato flavor even more, and it will act as a thickener. For the past couple years, I have just saved it back in a mason jar. I'm the worst at having tomato paste on hand. I will leave the ratios down below of water to the tomato powder from the skins. It's great to have on hand and you don't have waste. The other reason I like freezing my tomatoes instead of the boiling, blanching process. After Preston and I got done washing, coring, and cutting off any of the spots on the tomatoes, we put them on a pan, stuck them in the freezer. They've been froze for a couple days now. I've got ample time today to work and process it all. I've got a frozen tomato. So I've cut the spot on the bottom here. One thing I've learned, if you just core out the top part where the stem is attached, the skin will stay on the bottom because of that one spot. So now that I have cored it out and cut that off, the skin should come off even easier. Simple fix if you forget to do it. I've already seen one tomato where I forgot to take a spot off on the skin, so it will probably hang right there, we can easily cut that off after they thaw. But we've got our frozen tomato. What I'm gonna do, take the tomatoes, and I'm just going to lay them on trays. So I have a cookie tray, it's got a little bit of a ledge, and it's got a cooling rack inside of it. You want something to where the tomatoes will be up out of the liquid, and some sort of pan that will collect the liquid, because as the tomato thaws, one, not only will the skin come off super easy, but two, some of the liquid inside will drain down into the pan. When I first figured this out, it was amazing, because previously you would have to do the blanching process, and then you would get your mixture all together, put it in a pot, and then what's your next step? You have to cook it down. You got to cook some of that liquid out. This saves that step as well. So as the tomato freezes, it's going to expand. Whenever it starts to thaw, it's going to contract back. That's why the skins come off so easily, and then the liquid drains out. I will put in a picture here of last year, the tomatoes on the pan, and how much liquid came out of that pan of tomatoes. It was unreal. I've been sold ever since. So it's gonna take a couple hours for the tomatoes to thaw. I'm gonna go ahead and get it started. It's still early in the morning. I'm gonna get all the tomatoes laid out as flat as I can. I try not to stack them on top of each other. Sometimes you just have to. We'll see how far we can get with the pans I have. I'm gonna let them thaw for a couple hours. Come back, we'll take the skins off, pour the juice out, and we'll get to processing. One thing to note when you're placing the tomatoes on the pan is to place them cord side down. So you can see here where I cored out the tomato, that's going to go down touching the rack, as that's the biggest area where the liquid will drain from. Okay, I've got all of the frozen tomatoes out on sheet pans and racks. I'm gonna go ahead and let them de-thaw for a couple hours. I'll kind of check them as time goes on. Some may need longer than others, and that is perfectly fine. The bigger ones will probably need more time just because of size. The longer you let them set, the more liquid that's going to come out of the tomatoes per se. Best part is whenever you go to take the skins off, they slip right off. But for right now, it's just a waiting game. We'll let these thaw out and go to the next step. It's been about an hour and a half that the tomatoes have been setting out, and I just want to show you the liquid that's starting to gather on the bottom there and where we're at so far with the tomatoes. You can kind of tell they're getting a little wrinkly. I could probably, yeah. I think I might go ahead and start taking some of the skins off. At least the ones that I'm going to make salsa with, because I'm going to share with you another tip of mine when processing tomatoes that you're going to use for salsa after they've been frozen. My purpose of this video is to give you some tips and tricks and hacks, if you want to call it, when working with tomatoes. Part of the tomatoes that I've got thawing that I'm going to work up today, I'm going to be making into salsa. Here's my tip trick for the tomatoes when making salsa. These are thawing out, but before they completely thaw out, take the skins off and use a slicer on them. I got this slicer for $1 at a garage sale years ago. It is missing the container at the bottom, but it's okay because this will work just fine. I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but the squares for this specific slicer is a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. I learned this last year. Take the frozen tomatoes, place them on here, and they slice up pretty good. Some of these may be a little bit too soft to do this with. It'll just mush it. So for those, I will take just a knife and kind of chop it up. But this saves so much more time. I'm going to take this group of tomatoes and work them up for salsa and let the other ones keep thawing out, as those will be used for sauces. I'll show you the setup that I have. We've got our tomatoes that are thawing. I've got a bowl with a strainer on top to put the skins in. I'm going to try to strain out as much liquid from the skins as I can before I dehydrate. It'll just quicken the process of dehydrating those. I've got my slicer and a bowl to put it all in. I can't make this up, guys. Look how easy the skin comes right off the tomato. Put that in the bowl. I'll see how well it slices up. Nice chunks for the salsa. As you're going through your tomatoes, you may find some that are a little bit too soft. If you use the dicer, it may just mush them. For those tomatoes, I will just get a cutting board out and a knife, and I will just dice those up by hand. That would also be a way to incorporate larger chunks, if you like a chunkier types of salsa, to cut some of them by hand. Okay, I just finished cutting the 17 pounds of tomatoes that I need for the salsa. I want to also show you, though, the skins that came off of all of those tomatoes. There's a little bit of juice down there in the bottom yet. And then the liquid that came off of it. So just with those 17 pounds of tomatoes, we've got 4 cups here and a little over 2 cups over here. So over 6 cups of liquid came off of those tomatoes. Now I know with salsa it's not as important to cook off all of the liquid, but I just want to give you an idea of how much comes off of this process. As I mentioned earlier, I use Miss Wages mixes for almost all of my tomato products. I've got a medium salsa here, and that's what I'm going to be using to make the salsa today. We've already went through the process of washing, removing the skins, so now I'm down to where I combine the tomatoes with the vinegar and the mix. I'm going to get this transferred into a pot because it does call for bringing the mixture to a boil and then simmering for 10 minutes. I'm still going to go through that. Once that is simmered, we will be ready to get them in jars and process. If you're a multitasker, this is perfect because while the other tomatoes are still thawing out and the liquid is slowly dripping down, we can work on the salsa, get it out in the canner. While it is in its hot bath, we can come back in and start processing the other tomatoes and having those ready. I like to multitask as much as I can. I think that's going to help today as we're going to make a lot of progress with these tomatoes. The salsa has simmered down and is ready to be put into jars and get started on the water bath. Making sure your jars are hot, you will fill to the appropriate level your jars with the salsa. Here we will want to leave a 1/2 inch head space from the salsa to the rim, the top of the jar. Once the jars are full, you will want to make sure and wipe off the rim of each jar to make sure it is free of food and liquid particles so you have a good seal. Place your lids on top and screw the rings on fingertip tight. You don't want to over tighten it or it will buckle your lid and not create a good seal. We've got the jars in here. They need to be at a boil to hot water bath for 40 minutes. Meantime, while this is going with the hot water bath, I'm going to go inside and start processing some of the sauces from the other tomatoes. While I'm out here, another hack trick: if you do not have one of these burners, I think this one was called Campfire Chef or something similar to that, I highly suggest it. I personally don't like filling the house with any more heat than what I need to. We do have the air conditioner running, so the air conditioner is trying to cool the house down. I'm inside heating the house up. We purchased this several years ago. It's a 3-burner. Perfect. I can hook up the propane tank. All the heat is outside. All the mess is outside. So if you do a lot of canning, this is very, very useful. Highly suggested. Let's get inside and get started on the sauces. I know I kind of showed you something very similar to this earlier with the tomatoes that we used for the salsa, but I wanted to show you this batch of tomatoes here. There were 6 pounds of tomatoes, and they have been sitting for 4 hours. Within those 4 hours, we were able to drain off another almost 6 cups of liquid. This is what you would be trying to simmer off if you were to blanch the tomatoes, put them in the ice bath, mix everything together, and then cook it down. We've taken the liquid out. We should just be left with the pulp. Blend that up, mix up our sauce mixes, and it will already be thickened because all of this liquid has come off. Amazing, 6 cups of liquid from 6 pounds of tomatoes. Since we blended up the pulp, seeds, everything in the blender from the tomatoes, what I'm doing here is I'm straining out any seed particles or tiny pieces that we may not want in the sauce. I don't know about you, but years prior, I was never able to one-handedly, with a few fingers, take the skins off of tomatoes. Here I'm just showing you again how easy this process is. Another great tip to cook off the excess water and liquid out of your sauces or your tomato products is to put it in a roaster or a crock pot. Leave the lid tilted or cracked to where the water, the steam can evaporate, and let it cook on a low to medium heat for about 8 hours. Keep an eye on it. It may take less time, may take more time, depending on how much you are cooking down. But another great way to cook down your tomato product and thicken it. To dehydrate the skins, I will lay them out as flat as possible. You don't want to overcrowd or layer up the skins, if at all possible, just for ease of drying. We're going to use our Excalibur dehydrator. Place them in there. I only used a couple trays worth for the skins that I had. You will then have the temperature at 135, and I set it for about 6 to 8 hours. You'll just have to check it and see how dry they are as time goes on. Now for the sauces, I also use Miss Wages packets just for ease. After you take the skins off and blend it up, you will follow the combining step and then the canning step for the rest of the process. And here's our final product. We've got salsa, pizza sauce, and pasta sauce, all from today's work. I have tomato skins in the dehydrator drying. I will also make sure to leave the ratio and how to use tomato skins down below in the description, so make sure and check that out. I really hope you enjoyed today's video of tips, tricks, hacks for working up tomatoes from your garden. I would love to hear if you have any others you would like to include. Make sure to leave them down below in the comment section. And until next time, take care and happy gardening.
They're more antlers. They're what big ones? They're 3 big ones. Take this one. This one's soft. You know what? You feel it? Feel it?